Hello, I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine and welcome to Inner Voice Show. On this episode, we're going to talk about relationship, finances, and a whole lot more. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm an author and an international speaker. I have hosted my own television show, Inner Voice, in a satellite program for 16 years. Whether it's premarital counseling or through their marriage, how to deal with children, and if they're going through a divorce, to teach them how to communicate better together. In actuality, I think my job is very important to work with individuals and the couples in order to make the most important relationship of their life healthy, which makes them healthy. On my Inner Voice show, I actually interview some of the prominent psychologists and entertainers in English, and I also speak to some of the psychotherapists who are Iranians and the artists who are Iranians, and I speak in Persian to the Persian population around the world, from Iran or Europe or Japan, Australia, all over the United States and Canada, because obviously I was born in Iran.
Where's Dr. Zeine? Dr. Zeine?
Hello.
You also have been trained in my specific methodology and techniques, correct?
Yes.
Are you willing to talk to her after this show?
Absolutely.
And tell her the step-by-step that she needs to do to deal with what I believe is an addictive personality?
Yes, absolutely. The family goes through a lot. For boys who are becoming girls, the fathers of the family suffer. They will keep being confused. They look at all the childhood pictures that they've took of their son, and now they look at somebody who's standing in front of them and supposed to be their daughter. Coming up, I'm going to be talking to a psychotherapist about awareness integration model. You really want to know what that is, huh? Coming up. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine, psychotherapist, and I'm here with Nasreen Barkhordari, licensed marriage and family therapist. We're going to talk about awareness integration model, a psychological model that I have originated, and Nasreen Barkhordari is one of the first therapists who has actually learned and has been utilizing it with her clients. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. This is an honor.
Some of the major topics that I actually talk to my clients who are couples are first talking about sexuality. Many people don't know how to talk about sex. Concept of communication about it is something that I actually have to teach the couples and how to do. We talk about sexuality. Many people come into their sexuality in a very automatic way. We can go through the whole experience and wham, have a great time, but being with another human being, it actually takes skills. So becoming aware of every area of how we think, how we behave, how we feel, how we communicate with another human being in order to have an amazing sexuality is part of what we also teach in this AI model.
So much of our sexuality.
People don't talk about finances a lot. They don't have a system. They come from two backgrounds of how they actually have created their finances, and I have to help them create a system and have a great communication in how to follow the system. Another main topic is when they actually have children. Now remember, two people, two backgrounds, two cultures, two sets of values are coming in, and now they actually have to bring those together, and that's where they need how to communicate, be flexible, and really negotiate on one way of handling their kids. Duet, sometimes you guys are entering each other's space and singing together, and then solo. How does that experience for you?
The funny thing is,
in-laws, we have to deal with them. They're always there. They're going to be there. We didn't marry them, but they came with a package. So somehow we have to really, really work with them. And if I have to actually add one more topic that I've had to deal with a lot of couples and individuals is addiction. Whether it's an addiction to alcohol or drugs, pornography, cell phone, computers, is one aspect that really, really affects the person's life and in their relationship. With people who are going through recovery from addiction, they've had some sort of a trauma in their childhood. And when we've worked with the awareness integration model with them, clearing the trauma, the choice and the chance for them to relapsing is really minimized. I have been in the field of psychology for about 25 years. I started with seminars in ontology and psychology almost the same time. And I know you were part of the pilot study that we did, and in the result of that pilot study was that people were actually minimizing the depression 76%. They were minimizing anxiety 64%, and their self-esteem was rising about 43%. Now those are astonishing numbers.
You know, I wanted to go through it. I wanted to experience what my clients would experience. So I asked you to work on me as a model for the group that was being trained.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. If you like what you see, you can see more on my website and my YouTube channel. And if you want to contact me, I'm on Facebook and Twitter. Bye-bye. Hello, I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine, and welcome to the Inner Voice Show, the show that's about you and everything that's important to you in your life. We're going to talk to expert from a psychological perspective. I have an amazing guest today. He's going to talk about relationship and sexuality and all of the important factors that is really important to you. Mr. Todd Creager. Let me tell you a little bit about Todd Creager. He's a marriage and family therapist. He's also a sex therapist. He's the author of The Long Hot Marriage. What an amazing name for a book. A highly endorsed and regarded book for couples. And his brand new released book, are you waiting for this? Love, Sex and Karaoke, 52 Ways to Ignite Your Love Life. He has a private practice in Huntington Beach, and he does see couples in face-to-face and via Skype for the past 30 years. He's been a guest as a relation expert on many radio and TV shows, including the Fox Morning News, KCAL 9 in LA, Playboy Radio, and he was featured therapist on the show Unfaithful on the Oprah Winfrey Network. And I'm so glad to have him join us on our TV show. Thank you, Todd, for joining us. Welcome.
Great. Thank you. Great to be here.
Todd, I know that your latest book is out. I love that name. How come you chose the karaoke name on top of that? Love and Sex and 52 Ways of Karaoke. Is it? No. Wait a minute. Love, Sex and Karaoke, 52 Ways to Ignite Your Love Life.
Yeah, you know, I had a title, and it was really long. I didn't like it, and you know how this works. It was Sunday morning. I didn't think about it yet. I wake up, and there it was. That was there. It was in my head. That was it. Wrote it down. That was the title. You know, I thought of it. There's really several reasons why, and I think it was kind of bubbling in my brain. But for one of the tips I have includes an example I did when I went to a karaoke studio, and I made a series of love songs for my wife many years ago now, and I just spent the whole time doing this wonderful, what I would say, romantic piece of, you know, all these love songs, and I got it and I gave it to her for her birthday, and she didn't know what it was. She thought it was when it was cassettes, not even CDs. It was a cassette. And she says, "What is this? It's blank. There's no name on it." Well, I said, "Try it. Put it in. You'll see what it is." Ready to wow her. She puts it in the cassette player. I was terrible. I mean, I sounded so good in the karaoke studio, but in real life, I don't know. But we had a good laugh, and so that's one of the reasons I think about it, because she still was very touched by it. Yeah. But the other thing is just karaoke, you know. Karaoke is fun, it's playful, you find your voice, and in relationships we want to find our voice, we want to play, we want to have fun.
Right.
There's a little bit of risk involved, and so it's all that. And so anyway, the love and the sex part's pretty obvious, but that was why
Obviously,
I chose.
yes.
Yeah.
So one of the, as you're talking, what comes up for me is you see a lot of couples, and I see couples in my practice, and I know that when couples come in, many of them in a long-term relationship, they lose that passion, they lose that fun, they lose that play, the one you were just talking about, and how you were recreating it. And many times as they lose it, they're waiting for their partner to actually recreate it. Sometimes they don't take the responsibility to recreate it, or they really just don't know how. It just, by time, life happens to them, and somehow they allow all the chores of life to happen to them versus the play of life to happen to them. So what do you say?
Well said.
How do you talk to the couples to bring that back?
First of all, I help them realize that it's not their fault. Typically, we don't have the role models for it. Our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents typically didn't have the long, hot marriage. They might, at the very best, have a cordial marriage, but most of them didn't have a long, hot marriage. So when we're courting, when our courting stage, we fall in love, and all our hormones, our vasopressin and testosterone and oxytocin and all that great stuff comes up. But after a while, it kind of fades, and so we have to generate it. So the first thing I do is say, look, it's not your fault, but you know what the deal is? It's not about falling in love, and everyone falls out of love. People will say, oh, I fell out of love. Big deal, you fell. We all fall out of love. I mean, it's not a big deal. We're with the same person. I've been married almost 31 years. You fall out of love. But the key is, like you said, to generate it, to make it playful. We can't always lead by our feelings. Sometimes we got to think about what we used to do, or we need to just take a chance. Maybe be silly, maybe be playful. Maybe the woman dresses up in lingerie. Maybe she's not in the mood anymore because you're with little kids or whatever. They haven't done this in 3-4 years. So they have to be willing to go through a period of awkwardness. And I say there's nothing wrong if you're married for many years to be awkward. As a matter of fact, being awkward means that you're doing something new again. You're being more vulnerable. You're taking a chance. So that's what I start with them, and then in the sessions I have them, I mean, it's not like they're having sex in my office or anything, but I have them in any way I can to help them start to practice being more vulnerable with each other again, whether it's through conversation, through touch, through nonverbal techniques. I mean, basically, it's all about creating that positive intensity that they automatically had when they were dating. And they can do that with just a look, a touch. They just haven't done it in a long time. Like you say, they became so chore-focused that they stopped being play-focused.
And you talk about, in your book, about how to utilize the relationship as a gym for developing your muscles. And this one is emotional muscles, and how you can use their relationship in that. What do you mean by that?
When we all have muscle. And so if I go to the gym and I'm using weights, I'm developing my muscle. If I'm doing cardio, I'm developing my heart muscle. And likewise, we have emotional muscle in the sense of we need to be able to learn to listen, for example. Just simple. So if my wife says to me, I'm really angry at you, do I just react and fly off the handle? Do I just run out of the house? This is the automatic kind of knee-jerk response, this defensive response that we do so that we automatically reduce our tension. What we have to do as a couple is we have to learn how to experience our tension and then act in a more of a choiceful, in a more of a creative way. So marriage triggers us probably more than just about anything else. My partner isn't always going to applaud and give me a standing ovation, There are times when she's going to have a criticism or a complaint. It's my job to not close down, to not defend, but to practice developing that muscle to feel those feelings and to keep my heart open, my stomach soft and vulnerable, and my eyes open. And that takes practice. So that's what I mean. Marriage becomes this gymnasium to develop muscle, which then gives people sort of like a reframe to say, okay, marriage isn't always easy, but neither is going to the gym, but I do it. At least some people do it. I do it. And so marriage, I'm willing to take this on. If my partner says something that makes me uncomfortable, I am going to practice staying open rather than defend and close up.
So the concept of happily ever after is a concept that I think that because we are grown with it as a fantasy and in the cartoons that we're all kind of have been raised with, it's shifting to, yes, I can be happily ever after, but it's the concept that I have to create that happily ever after by exercising that someone in my life which I'm going to expect to be my best friend. You know, in this era, there's a lot of pressure on long-term relationships and marriage, so I expect them to be my best friend, expect him to be my business partner, manage everything in the house, be my best roommate, be my best lover, be everything to me, have amazing intellectual conversations while we play and have fun. And when we can have all of this, then obviously, because we're going to do many of the things together, and I have expectation that I'm going to get triggered emotionally, because a lot of these expectations might not necessarily come through all the time, and then I'm also going to expect them to be the mother and the father, and only the good stuff about my father and good stuff about my mother, and everything that they didn't have and it was negative, now I expect this partner to have the best of it and not even the negative ones. So having my expectation consistently be crashed, I'm going to be triggered. And the concept of happily ever after is more about how do I learn to maintain and manage these emotions while I'm there and while I create a partnership with my mate. And as I hear you, is the more that I look at this as a practice arena that I got to create mastery at, then I don't expect myself to know it all. I don't expect my partner to know it all, but I would bring it into an arena where I can keep getting better and better and better at it.
Boy, I couldn't have said that any better. That was great.
Boy, I couldn't have said that any better. That was great. And that is right. We can't expect to have a phenomenal marriage being average. That's just not how it works. We have to be above average. And really what it takes is just what you said. We have to work on that. We have to develop that muscle. We have to practice staying open. It's learning to go opposite our reflex. Learning to go opposite our reflex. When I went to the gym today, my reflex was to actually not go to the gym at all. I didn't want to go to the gym. It was easier to sit on the couch. But I went, and when I went to the gym, again, I was consistently disciplining myself so that I could be open and so that I can have the benefits of that, so that I can enjoy the benefits. Well, in marriage, it's the same thing. It's amazing. Marriage is phenomenal. I'm a salesman for marriage. I'm a salesman for long-term marriage. The catch is that we need to be brave, and we need to have the discipline of practicing going sometimes opposite the reflex. There's a statement I'll sometimes say, and I'll say this, especially to men, and I'll say, when you hear the sounds of the cannon, walk towards it. And what I mean by that is typically what makes the man, in this case, want to run, maybe his wife is angry, instead stay open, stay connected. But we haven't seen it. How many of us have seen mom say to dad, I'm really angry at you, and dad leans over in his chair and says, okay, honey, tell me more about that. It's just not what we've seen. So that's the practice, and yeah.
It's almost like you're saying to receive the emotion that comes rather than run away from it or fight against it, is to really be open to receive the emotion and see what it has and what type of a message it has. I also know that in one of the chapters in your book, you're talking about receiving in the bedroom. So it's not only about the emotionality, but also extending this offer and the gifts into the bedroom. Can you say more about that?
Sure. A lot of the times when couples come to me and one person or more, one or both have low sexual desire, typically, it could be a variety of reasons for that, but one of the reasons could be a mindset where, for example, I just worked with a couple today where the woman has low sexual desire. Well, we discover her sense of sex is about to satisfy the man. It's about making sure that she gives him enough sex That's the exact word she used. I want to give him enough sex so he's satisfied. That is
Just
not the right
shut him up
mindset.
pretty much, huh?
Right, just, yeah, we'll make it through another week where he doesn't complain as much because he had sex twice. But his complaint was that he didn't feel that she was enjoying it. She didn't realize that what he wanted wasn't necessarily sex. That wouldn't be bad either, but what he really wanted was his wife's desire. So what we have to do is start asking her, what is it that you want? How do you want to be touched? You know, what kind of foreplay do you want to have? And can you notice the resistance in your body, the fear, and what are some of the earlier messages you received sexually from your household? Was sex bad or not? Whatever the case may be. So it's learning to ask, what do I want? There's not a recipe. This is the exact words I said to her. Let's throw out the cookbook recipe. There's no recipe here. What you're going to do is from the inside out, you're going to ask yourself, how do I want to be kissed? Start with that. How do I want to? One of the things I said to her is, don't worry about even having sexual desire. You got to learn how to build that flame with like twigs. You don't start with the big logs. And so you ask, how do I want to be touched in the kitchen, even with my kids in the next room, over the next 34 seconds? And just begin eroticizing the relationship by asking you, how do I want to be touched? How do I want to touch? So this blew her away. It wasn't even a thought in her mind to start thinking like that. So that's what I mean.
It's interesting that many times it's important for us to know what we want and to know our own body and to know our needs and desires clearly, to be able to tell our partner in what it is that we need so that they can have a guideline about how to satisfy us in many, many realms. I've also noticed that many times in the when I talk to the couples, they are so much coming from I'm not getting what I need that it's hard for them to let go of that desire for you just to see me, hear me constantly and give me what I want, to extend themselves into the realm of the other, as if I'm not going to extend myself before I get what I want. And there's a power struggle that consistently happens in that mode, and it sometimes becomes really heated in their fights and in our sessions, where they're both grabbing really for just saying me, and it's about me, and if I don't get what I need, or they think that I've given you so much in my own mind or throughout the years that enough is enough. I'm just going to happen my way now. I'm not going to give you any more until you give me what I need. And a lot of separation happens at that moment. A lot of, now we're not in the same team. Now we're in the opposite team, just rooting for what I want. And what is your suggestion in that type of a mode when a couple is really just taking and holding?
Right, now that's sort of like the opposite problem, right? Because in the first one, it's like it's all about you and not about me.
Yeah.
And what you described is all about me and not about you, or I've given you in all these areas. There's a couple of things we could do. First of all, it's that mindset that you want the rewards, you got to give. There is nothing in our life that we have succeeded at without putting attention on it. So if I buy a plant, I got to put attention on it, at least enough to water it, give it the right sunlight. If I want to have a healthy body, I got to put attention on it. If I want a healthy marriage, I got to put attention on my partner. Attention is the most important word here. So what is it that you feel? What is it that you want? And I basically say that's how it works. I mean, that's like laws of gravity. If you jump off my second-story railing, you're going to get hurt. If you don't get out of your egocentric orbit and start thinking about the other person, you won't ultimately get anything back. And so I help them realize that just that's the way the law works. And then, of course, we want to look at where they were deprived. Some people were really so deprived as children that they are so hungry that they do have a hard time giving. And so in those cases, that they do need to be filled up. And sometimes they get filled up not necessarily just sexually, but they need to maybe get their own individual therapy, or they need to learn how to take turns giving and receiving. They need to start seeing each other rather than, like you said, a power struggle. There's two needy children. and they need to grow up, but at the same time they have those wounded parts of them there. So if we try to understand the other person that, okay, you have multiple parts to you. The part I really want is that adult, but you got that wounded child part of you that's hanging around. We oftentimes soften our stance and we get out of the power struggle. And when both people are doing that at the same time, we get somewhere. So, okay, you need to be heard, I need to be heard. Okay, you want to have sex with me more, but I want you to touch me slower. And we have to learn that it's just a give and take. And the other thing is that you mentioned, sometimes people say, I give and I give and I give, but that's when that whole idea of love language comes into play. Maybe I'm giving you, but I'm giving you, and I talk about this in my third chapter of my book, The Long Hot Marriage, where I say how to be a high-impact partner is oftentimes giving from your weakest link. So maybe I'm giving, but I'm giving from a strength in me, which is fine, but let's say I'm an engineer and I'm really good at providing for the family, construct a plan for retirement, and I'm doing all these things, but what my wife really needs from me is for me to be quiet, listen to her, ask her questions about her feelings, and maybe even share some of my own. And maybe that's what's going to fill her up. You know, so I have to realize too, it's learning to accept that I need to work on those areas of me so that she will be fulfilled, and I can't just give the way I was giving before.
So part of what I hear from you is that marriage is also for adult people. So there's not that we can't get married and take care of the part of us which is a little bit childlike and is needy and needs something, but it's also about our adult part to really see what it is that we need and then express it and have it out. Mm-hmm. There's also this aspect of romance that we have romance at the beginning of the relationship, that although it turns into maybe different forms of love, but also when the romance goes away and it just turns into different type of love. Obviously, when people have children, sometimes their love becomes a family love. You become part of the family in a sense when you're together. So love develops in a different way. But the passion and a romance that is in the beginning, sometimes it kind of goes away in the long-term relationship. And then people have a different version of what they think romance should be. They might have a different meaning and different versions for love versus romance. And in your book, you also talk about how important romance is and how to keep the romance in the whole marriage and not just the beginning stages of marriage, and how to keep developing that. So say more about that and the difference between what you call romance and what you call love.
Good question. I think many couples have loving relationships, but the playfulness, as you said before, and their sexuality and their romance and their flirting has faded away. And so we want both. You know, we want love. We don't want to leave the love out. Love, the caring. I care about what goes on with you. I do everything I can to help you out. But we also want that other part. So why we lose that other part is probably some of it's physiological, really. That we don't have to generate it in the beginning. We fall in love, like I said before, and our hormones are all there, and then we have to generate it. But when we generate it, we could create new hormones. And so it means leaving our comfort zone. Really important to have a long, hot marriage. We need to leave our comfort zone. We need to try something that, again, going through that awkward period. Now, I define romance as anything I do that uplifts the energy of my partner. So I could plan a 1 week or 2 week trip to Fiji. That's quite romantic. But I could take 10 or 15 seconds to text my wife and say, I was just thinking about you. Boy, you have sexy legs. Something like that. Now that is romantic. Why? Because my guess is that if my wife looks at that, it brings a smile to her face. It also, in a very subtle way, begins to maybe not so subtle, but it's supposed to eroticize the relationship. Now we're not just co-parents. We're not just co-contributors to our financial funds or co-homeowners. Suddenly now we're flirting. Now maybe I haven't done that in a while. Now, I'm not speaking about me, I'm speaking in general public, because everything I tell clients I practice in my own marriage. I think it's really important. But if I have clients that haven't done this in a long time, their first text to say, I've been thinking about you and you're very beautiful and sexy, might be hard, because that sets them up for maybe rejection. Maybe their partner's not going to respond that well. So, hooked in with romance is courage. We need to be courageous, and we need to think about, what can I say that will bring some romance, some playfulness, and some sexiness to the marriage? How do I look at you? How do I touch you? You know, those little things. Like I said, it starts with those twigs, not the big logs. And then the logs catch on.
Yeah.
Fire.
You know what happens also that I've seen? Many people who have separated romance and sexuality. I see many clients who, because they don't have this type of a romance all day, they don't connect with each other, they don't text, they don't call, or they don't flirt all day. So they're in the business of life, and then the chores, and then doing everything with the kids, and they're exhausted, and then, you know, they come to bed, and it's, okay, let's have sex, that's where we're going to connect. And many times I've heard, female more than male, that it's like, what? He just wants to have sex with me. He doesn't have anything else to do with me except when we get to, to the bed, he just wants to have sex. So then it's interesting that even when they start doing this flirtatiousness, to them at that moment, because it's gotten associated with pain and selfishness and all of that, now they're even like taking away and negating and rejecting those bits of connection which are being flirtatiousness, because they've already attached the sexuality to only a chore part for the night. It's like they've done all the chores and now they got to do this chore. And it's how to bring that passion and connectivity back together so that they can be a good receiver.
Great question. Pace. That's the word. We have to slow down our pace. This isn't easy, right? I mean, I spend time to take time out of my day to go to the gym or to meditate. We need to do the same thing with our partner. I cannot tell you how many couples, and I'm sure you've had the same thing too, with couples say, well, yeah, we're so busy. I mean, we have 2 kids, or we have 4 kids, and who has time? We don't have time for romance and passion. And, that is not true. What really it is we all have time. I do believe we have time. It's just that it doesn't have the sense of urgency that we need to create. And we need time in our day, and maybe not even every day. I have found the interesting thing is the time it takes to create that passion, that playfulness and that sexiness in our marriage is so much less time than it takes to be successful, let's say, at a job or even working out. I have clients spend 10 minutes a day. That's my thing. 10 minutes at minimum. They can do more. But 10 minutes a day, some men like the timer. They put on the timer so they know. I mean, whatever works to get them started. And there's 10 minutes where they slow down and they just give each other attention. And it's not, that 10 minutes is not time to say, how are we going to transport the kids to sports or dance or whatever they're doing. That's another time. These 10 minutes is a time to slow down, to look at each other, maybe to share a feeling or two, something that's going on their inside. Maybe touch, not necessarily goal-oriented touch, like let's touch to have sex, sexual intercourse. It's more of let's just touch to touch, let's slow down. And that's a big problem. We have to learn to slow down, even if it's for 10 minutes a day. I've wasted 10 minutes in so many ways. We all could find 10 minutes, and hopefully longer sometimes, like on the weekend. But when I have clients that are doing 10 minutes a day, their relationship transforms. And that 10 minutes of slowing down, looking at each other, and just putting everything on that back burner. This is a time when kids don't interfere. Maybe the kids are asleep, or maybe they just know this is our time, or whatever the case may be, but this is our time together. It's really important, because the speed of life is anti-romantic and it's anti-sexual, and we do need to bracket that time and do it, just like we do anything else that's important in our life.
Now, Todd, when a couple has been angry at each other and has been separated in their emotional perspective, when they take that 10 minutes to look at each other, a lot of pain pops up, a lot of
Right.
anger comes up, sadness comes up, and then vulnerability comes up, and because they can't handle the vulnerability at that moment and they don't want to show that vulnerability to the person who they're angry at, and the risk that they might get rejected, that 10 minutes then, instead of connecting, it becomes a little bit awkward. And I know you keep saying, it's okay, let's be awkward, and I agree.
Well, there's
let's
good
be
awkward and there's bad awkward.
And and truly, with all couples, with 25 years of working with couples, I have never seen when someone truly puts themselves in a vulnerable place that the other one rejects. I've never seen it. I know that that's our fear, and it's realistic fear, I get that, but I just haven't had that experience, and maybe you have, but so it's like, how do we support the couple that not only in our office but in their home to create this 10 minutes, and what do they say to themselves or the other partner to create that 10 minutes, regardless of how angry they are, to just kind of be together to build another level of connection?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to say that sometimes couples need a therapist or a coach when they have had a lot of pain to learn to connect, because it is so easy to go to that fight or flight that people do, this over and over, fight or flight reactions when they're angry or hurt, as opposed to developing that emotional muscle, looking at that person and staying connected. And sometimes they need someone like you or me. I work in person, I work by Skype. So I'm just saying that sometimes we need that. And it's like doing surgery on ourselves. We can't do it. So we need some help. But aside from that, they need to know that it's important that we can connect no matter what we're feeling. I have a chapter, again, in the book, The Long Hot Marriage. I think it's called, I haven't looked at my book in a while, but I think it's called Making Connection Stronger Than Control, or Making Connection Stronger Than the Pain. I'm not exactly sure. You might have it in front of you. But it's really about how to, yes, we have pain, but if give you an example. I had a couple come into my office last week, and she says, I'm so angry at him, I can't even look at him. And she goes, he says, yeah, me too. So I said, okay, well, here's what I want you to do. Kind of move your bodies towards each other and look at each other. And she says, Todd, did you hear me? Are you deaf? I just said, I don't want to look at him. I said, I know. So I want you to, face to each other and look at him and look at her. Go ahead. And they're looking at me like, what are you? I said, just follow my advice. Just look at each other. Go ahead. Now what I want you to do is just hold each other's hand. Okay. Now start telling each other, one person at a time, about express your anger. Now, what happened was amazing, because they did. They expressed their anger. But tears came down in her, and then eventually tears came down in him, and they were connecting. They hadn't talked in 2 days. Within 20 seconds, they were talking, and they were open. So what I did is I helped them go against their reflex, and then we want them to go home and build on it, because we know that when they're at home, there's going to be times when they're in pain, and what are they going to do? Fight or flight, and they got to catch it. And I told them they need to sit down just like they did in my office, and they're going to not want to do this at all, because when you're angry, you just want to hurt and destroy, but you're not going to act on that. You're going to learn how to be lovingly angry. So whether they're angry or sad, or of course appreciative or compassionate or loving, they can connect on any emotional level they want, as long as they're willing to develop that emotional muscle.
And you said lovingly angry. I think that's a great phrase. To even if we are angry because we said we wanted to be in this marriage and we want to create love, to honor our emotions lovingly, whether it's honoring our own emotion or honoring our partner's emotion lovingly. And I know sometimes it appears that anger and love might not exist at the same place, but when you express it lovingly, then the effect is different, and you're not even stabbing yourself, because sometimes when we're angry, it's not just that we're kind of stabbing our partner, we're also hurting ourselves consistently.
Absolutely.
So when we're doing that lovingly, it heals both of us as we're expressing it. But before we end, there's two points that I know it was in your book, and it's really interesting, and I wanted you to share with us. It's your different expression about what masculinity and femininity is, and how they play their role in a marriage.
That's good. Masculinity is the part of all of us, men and women, that can make an impact, that can penetrate. Like the man has the penis that can penetrate. We all have that ability to make things happen. So, for example, a man or a woman, when they're out in the workforce, they're in their masculine. When a woman, let's say, is taking care of her child, she's in her masculine. She's making things happen. She's making sure the child is fed. The feminine in us is the part of us that can receive, that can allow someone to be strong for us. It's like the vagina that receives. Okay, so we need, both men and women need to have both. I do believe that for most heterosexual couples, and even probably most homosexual couples, there's going to be one partner, and in hetero it could usually be the male, that has a masculine core where they need to feel that masculinity, and the woman needs to feel her femininity. Every relationship has to have that polarity, that sexual and gender, again, even same gender, needs to have that, I would say, energetic polarity between them, where there's a difference. And so, again, I've seen couples in many combinations where a man doesn't have enough feminine. He's giving, giving, giving. He doesn't know how to slow down. But in the cases with women, especially, I think a lot of women are in this hormonal crisis because they're so in their masculine, and then that's part of why they're not feeling sexual. And that's why they need to slow down. That's why the husband needs to slow down and realize her need to slow down so that she can reconnect with her feminine essence. And I do believe there's a mind-body thing that goes on. It brings up some of the feminine hormones and all oxytocin. So it's very important. And at the same time, we need, for example, the woman in this heterosexual example to oftentimes recognize that she needs to allow her man to be there for him. Mm-hmm. And some women have a hard time. So we need to access our independence, but also our dependence, depending on
having that
the
balance,
situation.
having the balance of masculinity and femininity for each one of us as a human being, but also within the relationship, allow that balance to happen, where if one partner is more in the masculine mode, for the other one to take on their feminine role, and then vice versa, so that they're both constantly complementing each other's kind of gender concepts, in a sense, or the essences.
Right.
So what would you say to women to have the most amount of impact on their mate, on men, and what would you say to men to have the most amount of impact on to women?
Sure. Again, you know that there's always exceptions, and sometimes I see gender role changes where the man is more sensitive and the woman is more. But let's just say in the majority of situations, the woman needs to realize that the man really I hear this so much, and I'm sure you do, the man needs to feel appreciated. He needs to feel appreciated. So it's absolutely fine to have complaints and have negative feelings, but the women needs to pay attention to the positive of the man and to recognize and to acknowledge him. That's where men thrive. Men thrive, as a general rule, on feeling appreciated, feeling like what they do matters and makes a difference. It's I'm making an impact on you. I'm feeling my masculine essence because I'm making an impact on you. So that would be from female to male. What the male needs to realize, again, is, I will say, that whole thing about pace. Women need to feel emotionally connected. Men tend to like to solve problems and fix it, and everything's good. Okay, how many times have I said to men, a lot of times the way to really make it work is stop trying to solve the problem and just be there. Be emotionally present. If a man wants to really have the best impact on a woman, he needs to practice emotional presence. So maybe the problem that she has is not for him to solve. It's just for him to listen. If the woman can appreciate him and the man can slow down and tune into her emotions and maybe even share some of his own, but that's going to go a long ways towards having that passionate, alive marriage.
Absolutely. Thank you, Todd. Any last words for our listeners and viewers of the show?
Well, I just want to say that it sounds challenging, but it's doable. It is doable. When I wrote my book, The Long Hot Marriage, my brother said, "Oh, I didn't know you wrote a fairy tale." It's not a fairy tale. It's not a fairy tale. It's real. It just means we got to be trailblazers and try new things, and we all have it within us to find our own power, to be creative. And it takes those little things as well as some of the big things, and it's very doable. So let's be optimistic. I've been doing this for 31 years now. I'm more optimistic about couples than I was when I started.
That's great. Thank you so much for coming on to my show. Please go to his website. It's on the, as you see it on the screen, toddcreager.com. You can get both of the books from his website and Amazon.com. The two books are The Long Hot Marriage, and the other one, I love the name, Love, Sex and Karaoke, 52 Ways to Ignite Your Love Life. Thank you, Todd, for joining me, and thank all of you for joining us. And until next week, create a wonderful life. Bye-bye.